Hi everyone. This video is going to be an introduction to trigonometry. We've spent the last few videos looking at Pythagoras' theorem, and now we're going to look at the relationship between angles in a triangle and the side lengths. In this video, we're just going to focus on labeling the sides of a triangle. You've already met the hypotenuse, and we're going to introduce two more terms, the opposite and the adjacent. So let's get into it. In trigonometry, at this stage, we are still just dealing with right-angled triangles. And what we're going to do is we're going to introduce some notation. So the first thing I'm going to discuss is this thing called the angle or the reference angle, depending on which text you are reading. And this is given the symbol theta, which is a Greek letter. You might wonder why we're not using an English letter. This is just the convention that has developed over the last few centuries. And of course, the Greeks contributed a lot to mathematics. And as you go further in maths, it's not uncommon to see other quantities represented with Greek letters as well. So when I have a right-angled triangle, I need to choose an angle that I'm referring to. So in this case, it might be this particular angle here. Now, you've already met the hypotenuse, which I'm going to label with the letter H. And you know how to do this as well. The hypotenuse is the longest side in a right-angled triangle. And it's always facing outwards from the right angle. Next, and what is new today, is the opposite side, which I'm going to label with the letter O, and the adjacent side, capital A. The opposite side is opposite theta. So instead of facing outwards from the right angle, it's facing outwards from theta. So you'll notice the opposite side, which I'm highlighting in yellow here, is not touching the angle theta. That's how you know it's the opposite side. And lastly, the adjacent side is the remaining side. So if I were to write this in words, I would say the hypotenuse is the longest side and it's facing outwards from the right angle. The opposite side is facing outwards from the reference angle theta. And the adjacent side is the side touching theta. So if I go back to this diagram, there are two sides that are touching the angle theta. One of them is the hypotenuse, and the one left over, which is not the hypotenuse, is the adjacent side. So it's the side touching theta, which is not the hypotenuse. The last thing I want to say is O and A change depending on where theta is. So if I copy this triangle and draw it again, this time with theta here in the top right rather than the bottom left, what's going to happen is the hypotenuse is still going to be facing outwards from the right angle, but now theta will be facing outwards, the opposite side O will be facing outwards from the new angle theta, and so O is going to be down the bottom, and then the remaining side A is going to be on the right here. So please note, depending on where I choose theta, I am going to label the opposite and adjacent sides differently. So keep that in mind. Let's finish with 4 examples. So all we're going to do is I'm going to take 4 right-angled triangles, and I'm going to use the letters O, A, and H to label the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse sides. You might like to pause the video here and just have a think about where you would label these 3 sides in each triangle. So, if you haven't paused the video, do so now, because now I'm going to go through the answers. I like to start with the hypotenuse. So, the hypotenuse is facing outwards from the right angle. So, I'm going to draw an arrow from the right angle to the hypotenuse. So there is H. Remember, the hypotenuse is the longest side in a right-angled triangle. After I've labeled the hypotenuse, I like to label O. The hypotenuse is easy. Once I've got H, I've narrowed down the opposite side to 2 sides. To label O, I need to look at the side that is facing outwards from the reference angle, theta. So again, I'm going to draw an arrow from the angle theta to the side which is opposite to it. And by the process of elimination, the adjacent side should be the side that's left over, which hasn't been labeled. All right, that is your introduction to trigonometry. This is the key skill, labeling the sides of a right-angled triangle as opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse, depending on where I choose my reference angle, theta. In the next video, we will use these definitions of O, A, and H to calculate sides in a triangle. See you then.